Hi, I'm Andy Eastwood, welcoming you to the Octopus Ukulele Academy. In this video, I'll be talking about how to hold the ukulele. Sounds pretty basic, doesn't it? But my goodness, it's important because the way you hold the instrument is going to affect every note you ever play. So we better get it right. Stick with us for some valuable information. Holding the ukulele. You'd think that would be day one, lesson one, wouldn't you? But I get people coming to me for uke lessons or at group workshops saying they're having trouble with a particular chord change or strumming technique. And there's sometimes people who've been playing for years. But more often than not, we end up talking about fundamental issues with the way they're holding the instrument. It's so important. So let's try to prevent any problems before they develop. Holding a ukulele shouldn't be difficult. It's not a particularly big instrument and it's not all that heavy, but you'd be amazed how much trouble some people seem to get into. So here we go. First of all, we generally want to play round about the middle point of the strings. Now obviously the strings are attached at each end, so the nearer you get to the middle, the less resistance there is in them. That's where they feel softest, and that's where you get the sweetest sound. And most of the time, that's just what we want. So we need a position that comfortably brings the strumming hand, the right hand, to the middle of the strings. So put your right hand around the neck at the point where it meets the body of the uke. Now I've got my thumb on one side of the neck, my forefinger and middle finger on the other, and my middle finger just being in the corner where the neck joins the body. The ring finger and little finger can just rest on the side of it there, and that's a very secure and comfortable way to pick up the uke. Now move the bottom end of the front of the uke in to touch your forearm. That part of the forearm is going to do most of the work in supporting the uke, just along that bottom edge. So from this position, bend the elbow so that you bring the uke in towards you and place the instrument against your body. Now, ukuleles come in all shapes and sizes, and so do people. So you have a little choice as to exactly where you hold it, to the side, to the front, high or low. Do whatever's comfortable for you. Now, at the moment, we only have one hand on the instrument. We're not playing it yet. But when I'm playing, that right hand's got to be free to move. So it can't sit there supporting the uke. But that's fine because when I'm playing, I'll be using the left hand. So that is going to support the instrument at this end, leaving the right hand free to move, but I'm still pressing it into the body with that right forearm. Not pressing hard, just enough to keep it in place. Now, the question that probably springs to mind is, what position should my left hand be in? Well, the answer is there's no set position because the left hand has to be very mobile to get around the fingerboard to reach whatever notes you have to play. The point is, wherever it goes, it's always going to be beneath the neck, so it's always able to support it. When I'm not pressing a note or a chord, the neck of the uke is just sitting on that bottom part of the index finger. When I am pressing a chord, the left arm is pulling the fingers onto the fingerboard, and that pulls the uke back towards me at this end, so that counteracts the pressure from the right arm. If I were to let go with the left hand, the uke would ping forward into the right hand, but while I'm playing, I'm maintaining the pressure at both ends, just enough pressure to keep it fairly still and hold it against the body. Now, if you get this right, you really don't have to think very much about holding the uke because holding it is a fundamental part of playing it. My right arm is keeping it in a position that brings the hand exactly to where it needs to be on the strings. And the very act of pressing the strings with the left hand to create chords or individual notes is pulling the uke towards me to balance the pressure at the other end. You may say, of course, what about when we're playing the open strings without any fingers in position on the frets? Well, in that case, just a little pull back on the neck with that bottom joint of the index finger will be sufficient to keep the uke in place. That's also true when you have a tricky chord change that requires you to lose contact with the strings. Just a little bit of friction between the neck and the first finger should be enough to keep the uke where you want it. So try not to worry too much about holding the uke. It should be easy. If it's not easy, you're probably doing something wrong. A big mistake that a lot of people make is they start to worry about letting the uke drop and then they grip it between their thumb and fingers. This is a very bad idea. You mustn't do it. There are even teachers out there who will tell you to plant your thumb in the middle of the back of the neck and then press against it with the fingers. This is really bad advice. Don't listen to these people, okay? It just leads to tension in the hand, and then it's very difficult to reach the chord shapes because the minute your hand is tense, it's not mobile anymore. For young children or people with small hands, the thumb resting gently behind the neck may sometimes be appropriate, but for most adults, that would take your fingers too far round. The thumb should normally just rest lightly on top of the neck. No pressure needed, just keep it in contact with the uke so that it's a reference point for finding your way around the instrument. And if you're doing something particularly tricky, it can help to guide and steady your hand or achieve an awkward position. But I must repeat, do not get into the habit of gripping the uke between thumb and fingers. It just leads to huge problems, and it could even do you some physical harm. A couple more things to mention. Firstly, the angle of the neck. You may be wondering, should I have it level or pointing up here? Well, it's not all that critical. Most people have it pointing up slightly, which looks neat and normal and perhaps brings your left hand nearer should you need to glance at it, and maybe psychologically it feels closer to you when it's up. But don't have it too high, because if the strings are at too much of an angle, you give your right hand a harder job getting across them quickly. So fairly level is best. Another question you may have in your mind is, what about playing sitting down? You've probably seen people resting the uke on their knee like this. Well, yes, that may be comfortable, but if you learn that way, you'll have to learn again a new technique when you want to stand up. So it kind of makes life a lot easier if you just learn in the way I've described, because then, whether sitting or standing, you'll be holding the uke in exactly the same way. The same thing kind of true with a strap as well. If you learn with a strap, you'll become dependent on it and never be able to play without it unless you relearn again from scratch. But we'll talk more about straps in another video. Just one more thing, and it's very important, so I've saved it till the end because I want you to remember it. This right wrist is not straight, it's curved. Now you can't tell from the front, and when you look at a ukulele player, you always watch from the front. So it's easy to assume that that wrist is straight. But if you had a bird's eye view, or a worm's eye view, you'd be able to see that that wrist is curved. That means that the forearm is pointing away from me a little and the hand is pointing back in, which brings my fingertips to where they need to be on the strings. Now, not only does that keep your arm away from the strings, so if you have a long sleeve on, it can't catch, and give your hand a good playing position, but that shape is essential for developing a good strumming technique. And that's something that we'll be talking about in another lesson. Perhaps I'll see you there. Bye for now.